a look a little bit about the elements. So in antiquity, they thought that there were, like, the world was built and people and everything was created out of 4 elements, which were water, air, earth, and fire. And everything else was a composition of this, and this comes from the Greeks, and it's very old, very ancient, right? Now, what is interesting, and what we were talking before, is that today we live in a world where everything is divided, but the vision that they had in antiquity, and this is one of the maxims of Hermeticism, is the first one, the most important of them all, is as above, so below, or as within, so without. So what they had was a unified theory of everything, where the rules and the aspects that rule the world and the outside and the space and time are the same that rule and control the body. So you can see this is a very interesting sigil, and is, by the way, this is the crest of today's Warburg Institute in London, right? But what this symbol represents is the unification of knowledge. And what you have is in the center, you have, it says, mundus annus homo, which means world, year, and man. And what it's showing you is the relationship and how everything is related and interconnected. So in a beautiful way, what they did is they created this very succinct symbol in which they show around, you can see the 4 elements, ignis, air, aqua, and terra. And then they related them to the seasons in the center, in the second ring, which are summer, spring, winter, autumn. So fire is summer, air is spring, water is winter, and earth is autumn. And then in the inner circle, what you have is 4 things. There is choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. So that's the next thing, and it's that in antiquity, what they thought is that the world, the body was controlled by humors, so that the psyche was controlled by 4 aspects, which were the 4 elements, which are the phlegmatic, the sanguine, the melancholic, and the choleric. And each of them was associated, and in this image you can see how the body is split in 4 quadrants, right? And you can see the symbols of the zodiac around representing time and the seasons. And each of these is an aspect of the mind, right? So phlegmatic, right, and they were related to parts of the body as well. So phlegmatic was associated with different organs like the lungs, sanguine with the liver, and melancholy with the spleen, and then the choleric was with the gall or the gallbladder. Now, what is interesting is that, so you see, we're tying here everything. We're tying the elements that compose the natural world with the seasons, and now this comes down to different organs or aspects of the psyche and emotions. And then what they had, right, and what they start doing in antiquity was these studies where they start to associate each of these elemental forces, right, or elemental aspects of the mind with different behaviors of people. And they have beautiful depictions about this. So in here, what you see is that the phlegmatic, right, on top is the moon, right, and it's associated with water. And then it represents forces that are, or different passions and emotions, right, like sloth and indifference, apathy. That's what that represents. Now, if you look at the sanguine, which is the next one, right? It is associated with the blood, right? But its impulses, right? It's impulsive. Is the lust, is gluttony, is everything that is bodily, right? Like body impulses. And then if you see choleric, right? From there comes the word in Spanish, for example, cólera, which is a disease, by the way, but also means fury, right? Choleric. And it it's associated with Mars, the god of war, and it represents all the aspects of the psyche associated with anger, with irritability, with frustration, and so on and so forth, right? So each of these are associated, each of the elements is associated with different aspects or passions of the mind. Now, what is interesting is that in the church, they, during a millennia, what they did is they cataloged all emotions and the interactions of all emotions. So here, what we're looking is the work of Raymond Lull, right, from the 1200s, right? He was a Franciscan Catalan, and this is the first guy to create a computer or a systematic way to catalog things. So he created all these books, which is pages and pages and pages of the different emotions and how they are associated with each other, how do they interact. But this was a systematical approach. So, and I bet you heard about the 7 sins or the 7 virtues, right? So what they did, they were obsessed with this idea of the psyche and how it works. And they created big studies of this. Now, I want to introduce to you another concept, right? That is an operant conditioning, which is a process of behavior modification in which a subject is encouraged to behave in a desired manner through positive or negative reinforcement, so that the subject comes to associate pleasure or displeasure to the reinforcement of the reinforcement with the behavior. So basically, through punishment and rewards, what you can do is you can modify the behavior of people. And this has been used very effectively since time immemorial. So if you look at the paintings, you go to a church, a Catholic church, a Christian church, and you look at the paintings, right? They always show these two things, and you can see it here. This is from Bosch, a beautiful painting from Bosch, where you see the paradise and hell. So beautiful, ugly, scary. So what you're doing is you're associating these emotions with wanted behaviors, desired behaviors. Now, what I want to show you is how you control the elementals, right? So let's look at a very simple, now that we have the tools to understand this, let's look at a very simple and very obvious
Jose, we have about five more minutes left. Five or six more minutes. But go ahead.
Okay, so can we do more?
Yeah, of course. 5 or 6 more minutes of you giving the presentation, then we should open it up to questions. Go ahead.
Okay. So let me fly through this. So basically what you do, right, is this is lust, and it's a representation of lust. So how do you create a complex of that? So very simple, right? Like you can see how that's used today. So what you do, how you control the elemental of lust, right? So what you're doing is you're creating a complex and association between a product, let's say in this case beer, and lust, right? So next time when you see beer in your subconscious, what you're thinking about is lust, right? So you're associating one with the other, and you know it. Now, this is the mother of all the elementals, right? On black magic is based on this, and it's the control of fear. A very simple example, right? This is very interesting. This is a campaign here in Brazil on smoking, and you can see how you are associating all these horrible images with smoking in order to try to control behavior. And then what you can see is how this has been done around the world very effectively. This is another one, right? Like the fear of predators. Well, the church used this a long time, right? And then what you have now, what you can see here, is that this is propaganda from the World War I and World War II. What you see is the same characteristics of the predator are shown and imposed on the enemy. Same thing here, right? The devil, right? The idea of this scary creature and so on. Well, look at this, right? The first one is a Jew portrayed by the Germans, and the second one, you know all of that, and look at the bottom one, right? So, imagina, that is the devil, right? Evil. And same thing, death, the fundamental, the elemental fear to death. You can see how it's being used, right, in propaganda, war propaganda. Same thing, let me fly through this, right? But you can see it's the same archetypes are used again and again and again. It's these elemental forces used to manipulate people and channel the forces of people, right? Authority. Look at this. Uncle Sam and God, right? It's the same thing. You're using the same archetype. This is my favorite one. Look at this image. Cannot be more staged, right? Like, it's the same archetype again and again and again. We have always seen our favorite politician holding kids. Same thing, right? The idea of the Madonna, exploited by Germans, by everybody. And then the family, the idea of the family, same thing, right? And now I want to go to the beef of the presentation, and it's the conjuration of supernatural entities. So let's take a look at this. And this is the key point. Let's see what supernatural means. It comes from supernaturalis in Latin, which is super, above, natura, supernatura. So it's above nature, right? And being beyond or exceeding the powers of nature, not occurring through the operation of merely physical laws, by an agency above the separate and separate from this. Now, one thing that is, keep that in mind, right? So another thing that is interesting is the use of sigils by magicians. The idea of a sigil is that it is a sign or a seal that is a mark that represents the signature of a demon, and it has the power to evoke it. So when you have this sign, you can evoke the demon that you're bringing. You're evoking the supernatural entity into existence when you do this. Another interesting thing is a conjurer. So a conjure comes from conjurare, to swear together. So basically it's a piece of paper where, like, do you remember the contract with the devil, right? Where you write a letter where you sell your soul to the devil and then you sign it, and then you're supposed to give this to the devil. And what you did is, you basically, what you're doing is you're calling the devil or this demon into existence or into reality by doing that. Now, this is the technical term for that is incorporatio, which is incorporation, which is the act of placing in a body or giving material form, incarnation, or embodiment, right? So the idea is that through all these signs and symbols and through what we saw here, through a conjure, right? What you're doing is you're bringing into existence, you're giving materiality to this supernatural entity. Now, let's take a look at this. This is interesting, right? This is a title of incorporation. And here is where the whole thing comes together. So think about this. What you're doing, right, is you have the priests, the magicians, which are creating laws. And do you remember what supernatural means? Is above and beyond the laws of nature. So what other laws do we have that are above and beyond the laws of nature? Well, the laws of man, right? The legislators, what the magicians do, what the laws are created, those are supernatural laws by definition, right? Literal. So what you're doing, right, is through the act of conjuration, what you're doing is you're summoning a supernatural entity, a demon, which is a corporation. Because think about it, a corporation is an entity that is supernatural, meaning it doesn't belong to this, nature is something that is created in the head of people. But it has real existence. And then what you have is the sigils that evoke them. So every time you see the symbol of Starbucks, right, what you're doing is you're bringing this concept, these creatures, this tulpa, the concept of this supernatural entity into existence, and you're modifying your behavior just by doing this. But think about it. It's magical. It doesn't exist. It's only in your head. It's a conjure. Now, I want to show you the biggest of all these creatures, right? And of these conjurations. And is what was called the Leviathan in the Bible. And by the way, the Leviathan is a book written by Sir Thomas Hobbes, right? Where he explains how the state should be created through fear. So I'm going to show you the conjuration of a Leviathan. You see here, so what you have is a ritual where what you are doing is you're conjuring, and you can see there these document, this magical document that brings into existence this supernatural entity. And here are all the sigils that evoke the flag, the eagle, all the seals that evoke this supernatural entity. And you can see the parallel, right? So you can see exactly how is the creation of the state. Now, in what happened, right, is that we have moved and progressed into a secular world in which the religious part has lost its preponderance, but the state and government has taken all the rules that used to be traditionally the religious part. So think about it. What we have done, right, is the state is something that exists in our heads. Is this entity that goes to war and makes people go to war and pay taxes and all these things, but it doesn't exist. It's a magical act. And this is the interesting thing. Look at this picture and think about it. This is in the Auschwitz, in the Holocaust Museum, right? And it's the preparation for selection on the ramp to Auschwitz. Now, look at the picture. You see how many guards are there? How many people with... There are 4 guards and thousands of people. But you see, they're not held there by the force of these people. They're held there by a spell. So this is the idea, right? What I want to show you, and just to conclude, what we have is that we live in a society that is magical. And we live with all these supernatural entities and we interact with them all day long. But we're in a deep trance and we don't see that we live in that trance. But the beauty of magic, right, is that once you see that the hat where the magician is taking the rabbit, is pulling the rabbit out, has a hole, right, and the rabbit is hidden there, then magic disappears. So this is what I want to show you, is that all this, as soon as you see what it is, and you take it for what it is, it disappears because it doesn't exist, right? It's a game. And just to conclude, it's very interesting because the idea of magic, right, is when you think about, I don't know, a magic ritual, what you think about is all this fantasy and all these images around it, right? And it's covered in fear, right? Because if I tell you the word supernatural, the first thing you think is a ghost, right? And it's scary, and because you have all these ghost stories when you were a kid. Now, the problem is that we are blinded to look at things literally. So when the magician is on the stage pulling the rabbit out, right? And he has a wand, you're distracted by the wand, and you don't look at the hat and the hole in the hat. So the same thing here. When we're blinded by the images that are associated to magic and myths and everything, and we're not able to think for what they are, what they really are. So when we think about supernatural entities, we imagine demons and all this, and yes, they exist, and yes, they are demons, but they're around us, and they control society, and we don't see it. So how's that for 5 minutes?
That's great. That's great, Jose. Okay, let's say thank you to Jose.